Hey everyone, welcome to WittCode, where in this video we're going to learn what environment variables are and how to work with them using Node and specifically the npm package .env. But so before we start, what are environment variables? Well, environment variables are variables set by the operating system that help form the environment that computer programs run in. They're made up of key value pairs, and we can actually get a list of our environment variables by opening up a command prompt and typing in set. So if I just open up a command prompt here, type in the word set, we can see a list of all different kinds of environment variables that we have on our computer. And actually, just as a common example, a commonly used environment variable is the path variable. So the path variable is an environment variable that contains an ordered list of the paths that the operating system will look at when executing a command. But so what is the purpose of environment variables? Well, environment variables are useful for separating programming and configuration, and this makes it easier to deploy an application in different environments. For example, the database configuration settings would be different for an application in development mode versus production mode, and these configuration settings can be stored as environment variables. And environment variables also allow for the protection of configuration settings. For example, API keys should not be hard-coded into an application out in production. Instead, API keys should be added as environment variables from a closed environment. And so let's tie this into Node now. So environment variables can be used to configure a Node application. And common uses of environment variables are setting the port of an application, configuring database connection settings, setting the development environment as development or production, and just all sorts of things like that. And now let's actually work with some environment variables in Node. So I'm just going to create a file here, call it index.js. And so in Node, environment variables are accessed using the process object. So just process like this. And so process is a global object that is injected during runtime that represents a Node process. And it contains properties used to interact with the Node process. And one of these properties is .env. And the property env provides access to all existing environment variables when the Node process it represents boots up. For example, we can access our path environment variable with the Node process object by just doing process.env.path. And now if I log this out, let's see this in action. Like I have the Node executable in my path environment variable, so I can just run Node from anywhere. So if we run node next.js, we get a list of all the paths to executable files that I have in my path environment variable. And so now let's talk about providing environment variables. So as process.env is just an object, so if I just type in, if I just log let's just log type of process.env.path like this, we should get object, run this, inside of all this, or sorry, not of path will be a string, but of env, which is an object. If we run this, we should see that it's simply an object. And because of this, a new property can be set the same way that a normal object would be. So we could just say, like, if we wanted to change the path, we could do process.env, or say we wanted to change the port number or something. We could do process.env.port equals 1234. And then if we log out port like this, we just get 1234. However, environment variables provided to Node this way are only set during execution of the Node process. So a better way to provide environment variables is through a configuration variable. For example, in a bash cell, so if I open up this and I have a Git that I can use as a bash shell, if I type in here, say, let's get rid of both of these, just leave this. If I type in port equals 1234 and then run node index.js, we can see we get printed 1234 as we passed in the port number as a configuration variable. However, this is still not the best way to provide environment variables to a Node process. The best way to do this is through an env file or an environment variables file. So to show you this, let me just create a file here called .env. And so all an env file is a text file that houses a set of key value pairs. For example, we could place the values for our database username. Say we could do db username equals root, the database password, so database password equals TOR, and maybe even something like an API key for something like Google Maps. So we could do like gmap API equals however long the API key is for that. And we could place these in a .env file. And so environment variable files are great for achieving project-specific configuration as they allow us to specify a variety of different environment variables, their values, all while keeping them hidden from the outside world. So let's talk about security in these env files. So environment variable files should not be shared with anyone or visible in the source code as they commonly contain sensitive information such as database passwords, as we can see here, and API keys. And as such, environment variable files should also not be pushed to any form of version control. And so if we're using GitHub or Git as the version control, we just need to create, to prevent this from happening, we can create a .gitignore file and just type in .env. And our file with a .env extension will not be pushed up when we commit our changes and push it to, say, our GitHub as a repository. And now let's talk about a way you can access these environment variables from within our Node application. So how can we basically attach them to this process.env object? Well, before I do this, what I want to first do, it's not that, but it is initialize this as an npm project by running npm init and then -y. And what this will do is it'll create a package.json file, which we can see here, that will list our dependencies, npm scripts that we can run, and essentially is just a lot of meta information about our project. And -y also just fills in all these defaults. So it provided node.env version and things like that. But now to access these environment variables in here, let me close out these two. What we can do is we can install an npm package called .env. We can install this by using npm install .env. And so .env is an npm package that loads environment variables from a .env file into process.env. So it loads these environmental variables into our process.env object. And so to access these environmental variables, all we have to do is just at the top of our page, require .env, and then just run config like this. And now we can log each one of those that we made in the other file. So we can do process.env, .db username. We could do process.env.db password. What was the other one? Process.env.gmap API, I believe. And now if we run this, so we run, let's just get rid of this port here. If we run this file, you can see what we get printed out is root, TOR, and then our API key. So it has accessed this env file and placed that all in here. And now I also want to talk about multiple environment variable files or multiple .env files. So it isn't uncommon to have multiple environment variable files. For example, we could have a .env file for development, which we could just call .env.development. We could have another .env file for production, which we could call .env.production. Close out of these. And this can also be implemented with .env. So the reason we found this env file in here is because by default, .env will look for a file just called .env. But if we pass in here, we can configure this with the key path, and then we can pass in a string, and then we could type in something like .env dot, and then $ process .env dot node environment. And now you might see where we're going with this is now whatever we load into here, So let me get these and let me put them in here and here. And let's just call this one production, production, and just leave those ones as default. And now the way we run, we can change this through a configuration variable called node-env, which basically means the node environment. And if we want the node environment to be production or development, say we do node-env, let's do production, and then we run node index.js, you can see what we get printed out now are the environment variables in here. And then if we ran this instead with not production, but development, we can get out our development, or basically we load into our node process our environment variables for a development environment. But so that's just kind of what I wanted to show you today. I'm going to go more in depth eventually on just environment variables and security specifically with them in a later time. But environment variables are great for application configuration and definitely a useful tool to have. So if you have any questions about any of this, leave them in the comments. I'll try and get back to you. I also have a website which has this code in it and just basically this video in a blog format if you prefer to read it that way. But besides that, thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing today, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.